I want to introduce you to the presenter, facilitator, Mrs. Jocelyn Seeley. Mrs. Seeley graduated from the University of the West Indies with a Bachelor of Arts in History, and she holds a Master's in Business Administration from Surrey University in England, and that has contributed greatly to her development of skills in strategic thinking, critical analysis, project management, as well as planning and organizing. Mrs. Seeley subsequently obtained certificates in PRDS, Trainer of Trainers, Processing Personal Matters in the Public Service, Supervisory Management, and Online Facilitating Training at the Now Learning and Development Directorate.
That's why my colleagues,
colleagues, could you kindly put your microphones on mute, please? Continuing, Mrs. Seeley subsequently obtained certificates in PRDS Trainer of Trainers, Processing Personal Matters in the Public Service, Supervisory Management, and Online Facilitating Training at the Now Learning and Development Directorate. And that has imparted many techniques and concepts necessary to understanding both learning and teaching styles. In addition, she recently successfully completed an online TEFL, which is Teaching English as a Foreign Language, having had the opportunity to work in the PRDS unit for the period 2010 to 2017 with emphasis on human resource management. She was able to combine training in performance management, as well as experience in organizing, planning, and evaluating with over 21 agencies that fell under her portfolio. Additionally, she has contributed to teamwork and always display a willing, patient, and helpful manner to this chosen area of which she is very passionate. Mrs. Seeley loves playing lawn tennis and played competitively at her secondary school. However, even though she's unable to play often, she keeps up with international players and competitions. Mrs. Seeley, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis, for that warm introduction. You and your team at the Learning and Development Directorate Department for affording me the opportunity to share my knowledge and experience with those who are attending this webinar. To all, a pleasant good morning to you. And it gives me great pleasure, as I say, to deliver this presentation, Navigating Performance and Productivity in the Public Service. And as Mr. Ellis has said, it's an area that is very passionate to me. Now, why navigating performance and productivity in the public service? When we hear the word navigating, we think about planning or directing a route of a course of a ship, an aircraft, or any form of transportation by using instruments or maps. However, today we're going to use that same word navigating to plan and direct the route of performance and productivity in the public service. And our instrument we'll be using will be the PRDS tool. So as Mr. Ellis said, what are our objectives for this presentation? By the end, you, the participants, will be able to define performance and productivity, identify what factors affect performance and productivity, explain what is performance management, identify ways to improve performance and productivity, and also discuss the impact of leadership on improving performance and productivity. But like anything else, we need to start with definitions. So as Mr. Ellis also indicated, you can share in the chat, what is your understanding of performance? What is your understanding of performance?
You can make him.
I've not seen any comments as yet. We have approximately 82 persons here. Any idea? When you hear the word performance, what comes to mind? Okay, reaching set targets, carrying out a task, executing a task, action. Yes. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your expression. All of those are key thoughts, carrying out a task. I think of the ability to carry out a task. Yes, please. So thank you for sharing. Now we're going to look at a working definition of what performance is. Now, as you see, we have some words that you would have used. Is the accomplishment of a given task measured against preset known standards of accuracy, completeness, cost, and speed. And when we're thinking about contract, that's what we have in the public service. We have a contract to fulfill an obligation. And in doing so, we do it in a manner that releases the performer ourselves from the liabilities under the contract. Now you would see here, as you notice, I have certain keywords highlighted: accomplishment, measured, standards. So as we go through the presentation, we will see why these are key terms: accomplishment, measured, and standards. Now that we have that working definition of performance, let's look at the next term we're going to look at: productivity. Again, you may share your views or expressions in the chat. One, when you hear the word productivity, what really comes to mind? Give you a few minutes, 1 minute, can share your expressions. Productivity, what comes to mind? Outcome of a task. Yes, Miss Eversley, thank you for that. We're looking at outputs. Output, yes, Tamisha, thank you for that. Yes, so outcomes, output. Thank you for sharing. Now let's look at the working definition. Productivity, yes. A measure of efficiency of a person, machine, factory, system in converting inputs into useful outputs. When we had looked at the word performance, we saw accomplishment. Though that accomplishment has to do with your outputs of something that was input into the system. And also too, productivity has to do with efficiency of a person. So now that we have those definitions, we know that as we navigate through our working life, there are always factors that affect performance and productivities. Because as we navigate, we know it's not an easy road, but there are certain obstacles that we have to overcome in order to achieve the performance and productivity that is required. So what are those factors? We have 7 that are identified. We have goal clarity. When we say goal clarity, what do we mean? It's the extent to which the outcome, goals, and objectives of the job are clearly stated and well-defined. And that is really Sawyer's definition of it. But the thing about it, I would like to ask you now, do you, whether you're in a managerial position or just an employee, do you have outcome, goals, and objectives in the agency to which you're assigned? Do you know your goals or do you know your objectives? Again, you can share in the chat because we really like to know. At your ministry or institution, do you know or do you have goals and objectives? You can keep sharing with us. I'm sure that you come from a number of ministries and a number of departments. Yes. Cartex say yes, she's aware of her goals and objectives for her agency. Anyone else? Or should I ask then, do you have job descriptions? Because that's where your goals and objectives are stated for each person. Kim Bob, yes. Lolita, yes. Okay. So yes, we always has set visions. Good, Tamisha, that's very good. You have your vision and missions. So most of you say yes. So in that way, if you have those clear goals and objectives that have been defined, then know that you have a feedback system in that you tell people what you think and based on facts and provide the evidence so that they can improve their performance. So that level of communication is open. And in looking at feedback, do you receive regular feedback on your performance, or do you provide regular feedback to those persons who you supervise? That's another question. You can put your answer in the chat, and Mr. Ellis, you can share as I go through the presentation. Another area is the environment. And when we think of the environment, what should come to mind? In the workplace, it's often assumed that the employees who are more satisfied with the physical environment are more likely to produce better work and outcomes. Remember, we're looking at productivity, the inputs, looking at outputs, how you work, how you produce your work, and if you're achieving the outcome of, as we say, the goal or those objectives. And from working in public service, I know that on the job description I mentioned earlier, there's an area that speaks to the physical environment you work. Because, you know, you might work in an area where you might have to work in a vault, being exposed to dust. And we know that dust can lead to sicknesses and like sinusitis, sick leave, and therefore less productivity within the organization. Some people who deal directly with the public might be exposed to verbal abuse. We work with the computers. We get the light from the computer screen. All of those are factors that impact one's performance and productivity. Another one, what about mental models? These are personal internal representatives of external reality that people use to interact with the world around them. And they are based really on your unique experiences, your perception of the organization, the understanding of how the ministry or department you work at, how it really works. What about the knowledge of the structures? Do you know the structure of your ministry or department? Anyone? Do you know the structure of your department? Are you familiar with the chain of command? Do you know who you report to or who you report on? Yes, Nolan, yes. So you have an organizational chart. Okay, so it seems that most of you are familiar with all of these terms, and therefore the mere fact that you had mentioned earlier, you have a job description, you know, contained within that job description that certain things are highlighted. And those are your job title, who you report to, who you report on, your duties, responsibilities, the experience, and so on. The educational knowledge for the job. The final area we're going to look at is motivation. Having all of those systems in place now, would you say that you're motivated? You know your goals and objectives, you're familiar with them, you have your job description in place, but with all of these, are you motivated? What do you say? No one is motivated? Job satisfaction. Yvette, yes, she's motivated. Nola, job satisfaction. Can we have some more chats coming through? Share your expression. This is your forum. You need to understand how you are feeling, what you have, what you go through, so that we can improve, again, efficiencies. That's why we're having this presentation. And we only had 2 comments so far, from Nola and from Yvette. Yes, thanks for your comment, Alison. Wendy, oh, that's very good, Wendy. No doubt you are motivated and you motivate others. But what self-motivation to complete my job tasks that motivate myself? Very good, Diana Gurish. Now, the thing about it, what motivates you though? What is it that motivates you? You're motivated, but what motivates you? And as a manager or supervisor, how do you motivate your staff? Well, you know, sometimes people need, their reward is financial, but we know in this economic system we're living, we're unable to do that. But do you say that you would thank your staff for a job well done? Good, Diana, yes. Yes, the purpose of the task. Do you a pat on the back? Well, we're in the COVID era, so we can't pat anybody on the back. Deborah, yes, communicating feedback and congratulating them. Very good. So I'm enjoying your comments. So that means that you all are on the right path. So here's a thought I want to leave with you. To motivate someone, I may need to involve them, inspire them, reward them, challenge them, or even celebrate them. So from your expressions, I can see that's what you do. So for those persons who don't have a system in place where they can congratulate the staff or give them feedback, motivate them, there's something I want you to carry away with. So to motivate someone, I may need to involve them, inspire them, reward them, challenge them, or even celebrate them. Now, we would move on now to the factors. So you have factors that affect performance and productivity. As long as we have factors, we also have strategies. And what of those strategies that can impact performance and productivity? And also to these strategies can be utilized in the attainment of performance and productivity. And when we hear strategies, some of you mentioned that you are familiar with the goals of your organization, the vision, and that's what it's all about, defining and communicating the vision. The vision, do you know where you were, where you're going? Do you know how you're getting there? And can you tell the things that help you or the things that tell you that you have gotten there? So that's looking at a vision. How long is your vision for? Is it a 2-year, a 3-year, or 5-year vision? Because in order to have performance and productivity successfully within your organization, the vision is very important. And as we see here, communicated, not only stated, but it should be communicated. You should be able to identify with it because it highlights the strategic direction of the organization. And therefore, that is what guides you in terms of what you are doing. In any ministry or department, we have different sections. We might have an admin section. We might have a computer section, account section, and all of those contribute to the vision of the organization, but it must be communicated so you will be able to identify with that vision, know where you are going, how you're going to get there, and the things that you have to do in order to get there. In addition, celebrating success. Employees want to feel appreciated and valued. Remember, we just touched on motivation. What are the motivation strategies that you have in place? And do you celebrate success? Another area is encouraging continuous learning. And we know the organizations are ever evolving. We would have moved from a manual way of doing things. We have evolved into the technology, the computer systems. All along, persons had to be trained for these. Here we are on Zoom today, evolving again, using the technology we have in order to improve performance and productivity. So we don't have to leave home nowadays to impart that knowledge. And therefore, we have to encourage continuous learning because it opens the possibility of growth and promotion. Another key area is to delegate and empower. Within your section, within your ministry, department, we know that there's a lot of work, but one person cannot do all. That's why we have a team effort, because together each achieve more. And therefore, with the job description, that's why we have that in place, so that persons will know their role and their responsibilities. And therefore, one person will not have to do all the work themselves. And by continuously learning, persons are being trained to improve their performance and productivity based on what they're learning. And also to sharing. Sharing is knowledge, knowledge is power. And when people have that knowledge, they're able to function on their own, and they don't have to be going to a supervisor asking questions or what to do as it relates to their tasks, because they have been empowered to make certain decisions. So also on your job description, there's an area of responsibility and authority. What is your responsibility? What authority do you have to get things done? If the supervisor is not there, would you be able to make a decision that will help with the performance and productivity, not only of the individual, but also the organization? Any questions so far? You can continue to put them in the chat. We really appreciate that. However, what do we have? We look at the factors, we look at the strategies, but what can help us to get there? Performance management. And that is the concept that we use. It is a continuous process, identifying, measuring, developing the performance of individuals and teams, and aligning performance with the strategic goals of the organization. We'll start from the bottom and go forward. Strategic goals. What are the strategic goals of your ministry and department? As I said, are they clearly communicated? Are you familiar with them? In the absence of a strategic document, what document do you have that you can use to guide you in terms of identifying, measuring, developing your performance? Well, each year, your department or ministry has to submit a program budget document. And in that program budget document, your yearly plan. What is it that the organization is doing for the year? In order to achieve that plan, therefore, you have to know what the account section is doing, the registry section, the admin section, the computer section, all of the areas within that ministry or department, what they are doing, what are the needs, and also the tools needed to work with so that they can achieve the information in that program budget document. So having that document, you're better able then for each section or each department within your organization to identify what you want, to measure what you want, to develop the performance of each individual within each department. And as we see here, very important, it's not a one-off thing. It's a continuous process. Remember back in the day, we had a document which spoke to our performance. However, it was given to us at the end of the year, and we saw these A's and B's. We did not know why we got an A, why we got a B. What is it that we would have done to achieve them? And you know, it led to a lot of conflict because persons were not in agreement with what was said. So for you, do you have a performance management system in your organization? If so, you can share in the chat. Do you practice performance measurement? Should this performance program budget document be shared with all staff? The program budget document, the supervisors usually are the ones who contribute to it, but the staff might not be aware of it. But what you do in your department, you sit down and your supervisor might ask, what are the things that we're going to do for the period, and ask your contribution on it. The strategic plan should be discussed, should be communicated with the staff. Everyone should know about the strategic plan, but higher management, they're the ones who are responsible for that strategic plan. But it should be communicated to the staff, because remember, we're looking at performance management. In order to identify with what is happening in the organization, then that is part of your vision. What do I do that contribute to achieving these goals or these objectives of my ministry or department? So the question is, do you have a performance management system in your organization? Do you have a system of continuous process of identifying, of giving feedback to your staff, strategic goals? Yes, Wendy, that is great. Nola, yes, PRDS, we're going to look at that next, Nola, which is very good. Anyone else? That's just 2 comments. Allison Bess, good. That's 3. Yes, Diana Gurridge. How are you this morning, Diana? 89 of you, and that's just 4 comments. Most persons are saying PRDS, Brenda, Lita. Okay, fine. Oh, Deborah Kelman, they've now started it on a pilot process. Yes, we do. Great. Now that's great. So we have performance management. Thanks for sharing. And in order to be effective, this is how the system works. So it's a process. It tracks your performance on employees consistently and measurably. Most of you spoke about PRDS. So are you doing this? Are you processing or tracking the performance of the employees consistently and measurably? What tool do you have that measures the performance? We're going to look at that a little later. And as you see, leads to improve performance and productivity, because it allows for a quicker identification of good and poor performance and give a framework to guide future improvement. Remember, we said that we are looking at achieving those objectives and goals of the organization. So if you have a good working performance management system in place, we know that these outputs would be identified. And we know that we are talking about navigating. Navigating, as we say, is not a smooth process, but we would have good performers and we will have poor performers. And that's at the individual level. At the organizational level, we will have a framework then to guide future improvements. And what do we have? in place, as you just mentioned, the tool, the performance review and development system. And most of you would have mentioned that. And as we look at what the goals are of the PRDS, as we say in short, it aims to develop a culture of renewed professionalism in the public service. Aims to develop a culture of renewed professionalism. Do you think there's a need for renewed professionalism, and why? Could you share your thoughts in the chat? Do you think that there is a need for renewed professionalism, and why? Any thoughts? Yes, processes are changing technology. Thank you for sharing your thought, Nola. To maximize productivity and motivation of staff. But the mere fact that they mentioned renewed professionalism, do you think there was professionalism before in the public service, that we have to renew it? Yes, Wendy. And Michelle, of course, persons need to be exposed. Yeah, yes. Because you know that I remember when I entered the public service, we were not supervisors. Yes, they would supervise. However, from being exposed then to the different legislation that governs the different departments or ministries that I worked at, I recognized that certain things were not being enforced according to the law. So now that we have this new system, the performance review and development system, persons have to be now familiar with what governs what they do within their respective ministry or department. So in addition to the laws, the Public Service Act, which you should be familiar with, do you also have legislation that governs what you do? What are you guided by in your ministry and department? And by the supervisors or management informing or communicating this to the staff, then we have a renewed professionalism. So we want to develop that culture whereby persons are now more knowledgeable. We have no more the knowledge worker, whereby no matter what they do, they're familiar with what they do and why they're doing it. And also to be known now that all posts are advertised, and therefore you have to be able to go to the interview and express yourself in terms of the post that you apply for. So renewed professionalism, yes, definitely. Also too, you have to be able to measure the employee work performance. Do you have a tool that measures your employee work performance? We're going to examine a document to see what that document looked like. But the question is, do you have a tool that measures employee work performance? Just type in the chat. Yes, Wendy, work plan. Yes. Anyone else? Wendy says work plan. Anyone else? Work plan? Do you have a work plan in place? Tamisha said job description. Nola, yes, she has work plans too at her institution. Yes, 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 yes. Both. Polly Miller said yes, they have both the job description and the work plan. Standard operating procedures, work plan and job description. King J, right. So if you do, you are on the right path. Again, PRDS, it's an annual cycle of planning, objective setting, coaching, review, and feedback. So with those two documents in place, no doubt then you are on your way to practicing a very efficient system. Now we're going to look at a model now that really breaks it down in terms of the PRDS objectives and productivity. So what are some of the things that you, managers, supervisors, should know? You should be able to link performance to key tasks and key results. What does this really mean? That the employees are able to understand their fit within the organization and the importance of their roles. Now, as we had said earlier, and I reiterate, you have to know the goals, those strategic goals. What is the vision? Those 2-year, 3-year, 5-year strategic plans, or your program budget document. What are the key tasks and key results? Are they documented? Well, for most of you, you said you have job descriptions in place, so no doubt they're documented, and therefore they would have come from that program budget document, that strategic plan. So most of you have the job description. Then improving work planning. We have empowerment, we have dialogue, clear objective, improve service delivery. So improving work planning, you also said or indicated that you have work plans. And as we know, work plans, as we look at performance management, it entails dialogue, that two-way communication, because actually in producing these documents, it should have been collaboration and communication between both the supervisor and the employee. So they have clear objectives. As we say, so that you wouldn't have to go back to your supervisor all the time like we did previously with the old system, asking what is your next task. They're clearly defined, they're documented, and therefore it empowers you to have certain responsibilities. Next, we have identified employee competencies for training and development. And that is something that is very critical. You have the documents in place, and therefore, as a result of giving the officer feedback, as a result of monitoring, that continuous monitoring of the employees' performance, then you'll be able to identify certain strategies. You know the competencies of the officer, and if anything is lacking, then you know training and development is very important. Increase skill and knowledge, improve attitudes, approach to work tasks. So those 3 areas. Now we have improved dialogue between supervisors and officers. For you who are supervisors, you said that you have the job description and you have the work plan in place. Now, how often do you have that dialogue with your staff? Is the opportunity provided for feedback and to determine whether the objectives have been achieved? Are there strategies that you have in place in the event that the objectives were not achieved? I would like to get some feedback on that in the chat, please. Do you usually have dialogue, that feedback with your staff, communicate whether they have achieved or not achieved the objectives, and to what extent? You can share in the chat. And how often do you do it? One. Several of you have mentioned you have job description, work plans, but do you offer feedback based on those work plans, those objectives that should be stated in the work plan? I give you a minute to put any of your expressions in the chat and share with the others. Okay, Michelle say as needed, usually quarterly. Yes, at progress meeting, monthly team meetings and half, Diana said. So you have monthly team meetings and then the individual session with the PRDS process, yes. So that's 3 persons so far that would have made dialogue and discussions are important in the process. Yes, Tricia also said that they gave dialogue and feedback, so that's good. Okay, and then performance improvement plans are mentioned here. Why is that? Remember we said that in navigating the performance and productivity throughout the period, you were given feedback, but navigation is not always smooth, as we continue to say. You might have some hurdles along the way. You have good performers, you have poor performers. How do you deal with poor performers? Well, we're going to look at the performance improvement plans. Has anyone been able to use one of these and how was it effective? So this tool helps us to, in giving feedback, to implement measures to improve poor performance. And it offers opportunity for counseling or coaching. And finally, we have recognition and rewards. As we said earlier, what about those staff members who are performing well, who are achieving their objective or exceeding the objectives? What recognition do they get? Remember you said you motivate the staff, you thank them, and job well done. So you should have the opportunity for that. Lens to motivation and productivity, pride in the achievement. Now, we looked at performance management, the concept, we look at the tool we're going to use. Now we're going to take your comments in the chat. Can you share why is work planning important? Why is work planning important? As you see here in the picture, have a supervisor making some notes using a document. Why is work planning important? Or do you think it is important? Linda was looking at the PIPs can be employed to develop further growth, strength, and also weaknesses in terms of job performance. Excellent. Yes. Wendy, if there's an issue that needs to be rectified, this is communicated to the officer, not only waiting quarterly. Excellent. Great. But now, work planning. Do you think it's important and why? And it says allow persons to understand what is expected of them. Excellent. It places the team in a better position to achieve success. Thank you, Pauline. So everyone is clear on the task and when it should be completed. It gives you the ability to forecast. Thank you, Allison. Linda keeps coaching an employee to save page. It's important, shows the complete staff. Tricia. Excellent, excellent comments. So I can see so far that you are very familiar with the PRDS and that you're really using it to its fullest potential. Yeah, so let's look at it. As most of you mentioned, it provides a way of coordinating the work that needs to be done with an emphasis on continuous improvement and innovation. Remember, we made the point of in the performance management, continuous, it's a continuous process. So it's something that you do continually. It's something that is done all year round. It's something that is done every year or should be done every year. Because not only at the organizational level, we want to achieve those strategic goals, we want to achieve our vision, but we have to do so on a continual basis. And why innovation? Because as was mentioned earlier, we are not operating in a technological era and we are having the webinar on Zoom. So for most of you now, you have to look for ways to improve efficiency. In order to have more people being trained, what would we have to do? Well, we have Zoom. More people are able to attend the session. We have 87 persons here present today. And before, we know that when we had the PRDS training, we had to go into the different agencies or we had to coordinate courses. And no, the 87 persons were not able to attend. So you see, innovation, looking at ways to improve efficiency, innovation is very critical. Also too, work plan is an innovative approach to accomplishing the work in an organization and managing the staff who performs that work. So most of you were in agreement with those. In addition, as we said, it provides the basis for empowering staff members to participate in planning how their work best is accomplished with the available resources. And as we had looked at, and most of you would have agreed, you have job descriptions and work plans in place, which helps you to do so efficiently and effectively. Identifies the work which needs to be accomplished by an individual staff member in order to successfully achieve the aims of their work group and organization. And now we have the documents. For those persons who are not familiar, we just discussed setting objectives, achieving objectives, measuring performance. All of these key terms were used throughout the presentation. And here is a copy of what the work plan should look like. The objectives. The objectives, what are the objectives? As it said here, they should be specific, they should be measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound or time-framed. For those persons who practice PRDS, for those persons who don't practice it as yet, who are in the process of doing so, are you familiar with this document? Your objectives on the document, do you know where they come from? How are they written? Anyone wants to tell us? How do you get the objectives for your work plan? Do you just write down anything? How are they written? Just give us an example in the chat. Yes, they come from the job description. Yes, they come from the job description. Excellent. They come from the job description under your task. Yes. Thank you for your expressions. And for example, an admin officer might have to prepare cabinet papers. You have a cabinet paper to prepare. How do you prepare that cabinet paper? Is it within a specified time frame? And so the objective is preparing a cabinet paper, maybe within 2 or 3 working days of receipt. I know because how things go now, it's like yesterday. However, that is why we have objectives in place. Prepare a cabinet paper within 3 days of receipt, which means that the receipt of the information. When you receive the information, you have to prepare that document within that specified time frame. Now, for the supervisor, how do you know that that has been achieved? Performance measure. What would tell you, the supervisor, that the cabinet paper has been completed within 3 working days of receipt? Now, the performance measure should state the outcome. Remember, that's your input. Input, what's the output? That when you would have given that cabinet paper, that it would have been completed within those 3 working days of the information. Simple. Input, output. And what skills should the employee have? Now remember, that's why the job description work plan go in tandem, because if you're working in the admin area, then no doubt you will have to have certain skills and abilities and certain knowledge experience, which are your competencies. And therefore, in developing a work plan under additional skills, you should have that knowledge, that experience, and those skills and abilities, which are your competencies. So that if anyone who comes into the department or ministry after, they should be able to see that work plan and able to have those. Failure to have those competencies, then you see how training and development comes in. So that is your work plan. Everything should be stated. Also too, on the work plan, remember, we're looking at performance. It has to be agreed. It can only be agreed if it has been communicated. The staff, was the staff able to sit with the supervisor and discuss their work plan? Were they able to have an input in terms of the job description and the work plan? On the performance management, that is what should obtain. If you're now rolling it out, having that communication, and that's why communication is very critical. Not only downward communication, but upward. Because remember, before, when anything was being introduced into the ministry or department, it would come from top management. We would receive a memo or something informed about PRDS is going to be implemented. Now, remember, we say we're looking to improve efficiencies. So now communication is very critical in terms of now everyone should be part of that shared vision, that strategy. It should be all empowering. So therefore, the staff should know why I'm doing what I'm doing. But for an admin officer, we just had that example. Having sat with the officer, is the officer able to achieve it? Is it realistic? Is it attainable? Do you think that preparing a cabinet paper within 3 working days on receipt of information, is it something that is realistic? So all of these things have to be communicated. So it's collaboration. That is why at the end of the day, the work plan is agreed, because the staff, they have the obligation to make sure that these are achieved, and the supervisor or manager has the responsibility to ensure that, yes, they are achieved. And it should be signed by the employee, as you say, the supervisor, and the next level manager. So for you persons who have the work plan in place, is it agreed? Do you have the relevant signatures and the dates? Share with us, please, in the chat. Yes, 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 it is. Great. Yes, great. Yes, all persons signed off. Wendy, you're doing well with your PRDS. That's great. Keep up the good work. No doubt you are. And so most of you said yes, so great. And 2, we would have looked at the continuous feedback. Continuous feedback based on what was achieved. And we have the next part of the document, the progress meetings, that continual feedback. And as you see, it's broken down into periods. For those persons who presently use it, we know what it looks like. For those persons who are now looking to implement PRDS, this is what the progress meeting, if you've heard about the term, this is what it looks like. And therefore, remember we looked at the admin officer, that example of preparing a cabinet paper within 3 days of receipt of the information. So here we come to the first progress meeting, which should be in July. And we're saying that, yes, it was achieved. Maybe someone, good performer. However, it was not achieved. Why was it not achieved? You have to make sure you state why. And we know for cabinet papers, sometimes we need information from other agencies that are not forthcoming within that time period. So therefore, that is how we know it was not achieved, because it would have been documented, unable to be achieved because the information that was required was not forthcoming. So in the first quarter, we recognize that that was not obtained. However, we have a rating system, rate according to how the employee performed. The next period, having put any measures in place to mitigate that. What about the second period, December? How was it? Was there any improvement? Why was there improvement? Was it a situation where the officer was unable to do it because the first time they're learning to prepare cabinet papers? Was there a mentorship program in place? Was there a coaching in place? Was there training in place? So all of these help to the growth and development, not only of the organization, but the employee as an individual, improving those efficiencies within the organization. And we have the second progress meeting in December, and then we have the progress meeting in March. I have to move along because time is against us. However, most of you would be familiar with that. But remember, we said that there is sometimes persons who perform poorly. What do you find to be some of those things that contribute to an employee's poor performance? Just share quickly, one or two. What are some things, even though throughout the course of reporting, employee may continue to perform poorly, even though you would have implemented maybe mentorship, coaching, training. What are some things that you find that continue to hinder an employee's performance? Lack of conflict with management, lack of resources, demotivation, non-attendance at work, lack of interest in the job, personal stress. Yes, I've found that personal stress, non-attendance at work, stress, staff morale, poor equipment, all of those things. Now, what is it that you do in order to improve that? These are just what we just discussed: the work plan document, the objectives, clearly communicated, roles and responsibility are clearly defined and agreed. And then we had it continually monitored and reviewed. We look at those two documents and the contingency plans and so on. Now, there is something called the performance improvement plan. I don't know if any of you would have had to use it, any of you know how to use it, but for all that you have said so far, you would have looked at the employees throughout the year. At the end of the year, you recognize that the performance is still poor. And you would have mentioned some of the key areas: low morale, non-attendance at work. And that is something from working with the 21 agencies that I found was also the situation. And some supervisors were at their wits' end as to what to do. So a performance improvement plan is critical. And what is it? It is a tool to give an employee with performance deficiency the opportunity to succeed, because we want to ensure that each employee reaches their optimal level of performance and productivity. We don't want to deem them as a lost cause. So each person is given an opportunity, as was mentioned in the chat. Some person non-attendance at work. Sometimes persons are going through things that we're not familiar with, we don't know. Some persons have to take care of like sick parents and so on. Some people might have a problem, So we have to address those areas because, as we said, we want everybody to improve to their optimal level of performance and productivity to achieve the success of the organization. So it may be used to address failures to meet specific job goals or to ameliorate behavior-related concerns. And as we know, outcomes may vary. Having implemented it, you might have improvement in performance, the recognition of a skills or training gap, or possible employment actions such as transfer, demotion, or termination. Based on what you have put in place, when you have set that performance improvement plan and it has been monitored, then you might have any of these can happen. You may have improvement, or you might have certain things transfer, demotion, or termination. And now I leave you here with a copy of what a sample performance improvement plan should look like. You have the name of the organization. Well, as you see, this section is for course management, the employee's name, the supervisor, the date, and the area to improve was time management. And what were the things that the employee had to do? And the supervisor, remember, the work plan is an agreed document, and whatever you do is agreed. The officer had to read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. They had to attend an in-service time management course, make a to-do list and prioritize, and note any deadlines missed and give reason. Now for the supervisor, they have to make sure they put in place that the training sessions are attended. They might have someone to mentor them to ensure that it is being done, to train them in terms of, or to ensure that they manage their time well. And then they have to monitor that list to make sure that everything is going according to discuss what was discussed and validate its success indication of effective time management, and discuss the deadlines missed, the reasons, and the suggestions for improvement. So this is just a sample copy for you who are practicing PRDS and not familiar with it. I know that your officer will be able to share this with you or sit down and discuss how to go about doing it. Now, we just discussed a lot of information. However, in order to achieve that success, it is based on the individual, you, the manager or the supervisor. And therefore, leadership is very critical to the success, because you have to make sure that you possess those competencies to ensure the success of the ministry or department with which you are aligned with. And therefore, it's one of the greatest fundamental to building great organizational culture. Because you, as the effective leader, set the agenda, prioritize, work, manage, lead, and delegate. All of these are part of the performance management process. You, the leader, you're the one who have to make sure that everything is in place. Strategic plan, from the strategic plans all the way down, communicated to the staff, the vision, the job descriptions, work plans, all of those things are in place. And also to provide a sense of vision, purpose, mentorship, and inspiration to those that they lead. And a positive, people say you have to lead by example. And that is what everyone should be doing in those positions. Because when you are an effective leader, then you have a powerful influence on performance, not only at the individual level, but most importantly at the organizational level. Pete Johnson, strategy is a style of thinking, a conscious and deliberate process, an intensive implementation system, the sense of ensuring future success. And that is what it has to be at the organizational level. Strategical thinking, critical thinking. Now we can review the objectives, share quickly in the chat. At the end of the day, we went through several areas, performance and productivity. Can you say you can now define what performance and productivity is based on what we discussed? EC Grant, I like your comment on PIP, yes. Might be the wrong fit, and that is why at the end of the day, even though it is implemented, then person might be, the outcome might be transferred also. What would you say is performance or productivity? Thanks for that comment, EC Grant. Just some quick comments. And as you go through, the factors affect performance and productivity. What is performance management? What are the ways to improve it? And the impact of the leadership on it, performance and productivity. Any thoughts you can share in the chat on any of them? Productivity is converting input into useful outputs, definitely. Yes, Cumberbatch, thank you for that. We have inputs and we have useful output based on what? The factors, what factors? What is performance management? Ways to improve leadership. Task measured against a preset. Yes, thank you, Tessa, for that definition of performance. It shows that learning took place. Yes. What about performance management? We have a definition of performance and productivity in the chat. What about performance management? Or ways to improve performance and productivity? Thank you for your comment, Diana. In terms of performance, completed against the set criteria measures. Yes, definitely. Anyone performance measurement, and what ways did we identify to improve performance and productivity? Okay, well, the process of yes, it's a continuous process, yes, of individuals. Thank you. Kim, Cumberbatch, yes. Thank you for your expressions, and Brenda. Okay, so we now have to move on. And do you have any questions? Share your questions using the chat. Any questions? We've come to the end of our presentation. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Mrs. Seeley. Thanks for that very much informative presentation. Could you kindly keep your presentation up, please?
Okay, sorry.
Please keep your presentation up. Thank you. All right. Yes, thank you very much for that timely information that you've just given us. It has been really enlightening and would therefore allow us as public officers and colleagues to share our reflections as we continue to navigate performance and productivity in the public service. I would have seen a couple of questions coming through the chat, and I will now pose those questions to you. One participant is asking, how are you supposed to respond if you move to a new department and the immediate supervisor never meet with you to discuss a job description, work plan, etc.?
What I usually suggest, that's a very good question, actually. What I usually suggest is if the supervisor has not approached you, if you have been exposed to the PRDS process, you approach the supervisor and kindly inform them, remember in what you say, but how you say. Kindly inform them that you're familiar with the PRDS and you know that you being there, that you should be in receipt of a job description and work plan. And since you're working at a particular desk, is there such documents that are available to you?
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much. Another question I'm seeing. I think one comment really is that PAP can work if the officer is willing. However, sometimes an employee might be the wrong fit for the job. So the supervisor might need to address that with the officer.
Definitely. And remember, as you make decisions, there's a next level manager involved in the whole PRDS process. So when we looked at the work plan, we saw 3 different signatures. So 3 persons are involved. If you recognize that you have done everything that you possibly could have to ensure that the officer improved their performance, then that will be a discussion with the next level manager. And all 3 of you discuss, and then it would be relayed to the head of the department, whether it's a permanent secretary or another officer, and y'all would discuss what is the better outcome for that employee.
Okay, thanks very much. Another question coming in here. One person is asking for the additional skills section. Would that not be completed after the performance of the task? And there's a recognition that additional training is required?
That is something that I discussed from the outset. And remember, on all job descriptions, that's where you would find those skills and the experience. For example, well, I worked in the admin area, and you had to have a knowledge of the Public Service Act. You have to have been trained onto how to prepare cabinet papers and so on. Remember I said when you go for an interview, all of those things, you should have a knowledge of all of those things. So those are the skills that would be needed. So when you discuss your job description and your work plan, those things will be in additional skills, the competencies that you should need in order to achieve your objective. Because it's okay to say, okay, you have to prepare a cabinet paper within a specified time, and this is how I'm going to be rating you. But what skills what competencies should it come with the job? Because it might not be someone who's presently in the post, but what about those persons who are moving around and when they get to the post? So that it would see then if they don't have those, if they should be trained also. So I think they should be mentioned from the outset.
Thanks very much for that response. Another question. Senior management have always stated that an officer may only receive a 5 on PRDS if they have gone over and above their normal tasks or implemented something outside of the normal way of working. Is this so?
That was a very contentious issue with the PRDS. Some persons are of that opinion, but what happened, if you look at the PRDS document, you have to be guided by what it says. From the outset on the cover page, it has a rating scale, 1 to 5. So management have to be guided by that rating scale, should be guided by that rating scale. As we know, the PRDS document, the last time, I think it was 38. So you can see how it would have evolved over time. And no doubt it would take some more tweaking, but until that, the management should be guided by that rating scale. That's how I would address that question.
Thanks very much for that response as well. Just one final question before we try to wrap up. PRDS review is supposed to be done between the employee and their immediate supervisor. However, at what stage is higher management involved in the process, or should they be involved?
Another excellent question. Yes, PRDS is between the employee and the immediate supervisor, because the immediate supervisor has the responsibility for ensuring that the employee achieve the objectives that were discussed. The next level manager, then, they are the ones that just review the document. So the immediate supervisor, they're the ones who sit directly with the employee. They're the ones who rate the employee, and then that information is forwarded to the next level manager. However, from my experience, I realized that sometimes there is a conflict between the employee and the supervisor, sometimes they don't get along. So what can happen is, with the agreement of the officer who is being reviewed, that they can ask the next level manager to sit in, but for observation purposes, to ensure that the process is done the way it should be done.
Excellent, excellent response. Participants, I want to encourage you to continue posing your questions that you might still have, but now is at this point in time that Ms. Seeley, you can forward your slide, that we would like to have your assistance in filling out and completing our evaluation form, which we are now placed in the chat. Miss Seeley, you can keep your screen up, please.
Okay.
But we're now going to be placing one of my colleagues, she's Miss Welch, she's just placed the feedback evaluation form in the chat, and we really would like you to complete our evaluation form, as this allows us to garner information from you, whereby we know how we can continue to improve our products and our respective say programs as well. So my colleague here has just placed that feedback form in the chat for you. So at your, we really would like to hear from you as you complete that feedback form. I'm still going to be looking at your questions, and what we've not been able to look at, I'll be able to compile them, and they will be sent out to you in a subsequent email. It's at this stage as well that you can forward the slide, Miss Seeley, to thing. Thanks very much. Yes, you go to the next one, please. All right, so it's at this time, I want to thank you, the participants, for interacting and attending this specific webinar. Just keep your screen up, please.
Yes,
now,
sorry.
just remember is that that a recording of this presentation will be made available on our directorate's YouTube channel. So you can go to search into YouTube, Learning and Development Directorate, to view this presentation when it is available, and some of our past, past presentations, some of our past webinars. Now, Ms. Seeley, any final words before we wrap up?
Yes, I would just like to thank you again for this opportunity, and thank the participants for sharing your information and your thoughts and your expressions in the chat. It really assisted with the presentation today, and it really gave me an oversight and insight really as to how you are progressing with your PRDS. And for those persons who gave their expressions, I can see that you are on your way to really achieving those objectives of your organization and improving the performance and productivity within the organization and the public service as a whole. So thank you again for that opportunity.
Thank you again, Ms. Seeley. As I said, we've placed the feedback form in the chat for you to complete for us. So it's at this stage now that on behalf of the Director General, Human Resources, and the Director, Learning and Development Directorate, our technical team here at the Directorate, I want to thank all of you participants once again for your support in making this webinar possible. Participants, thank you for participating, and do enjoy the remainder of your day. Thank you.